I mean, you leave money on the table to leave, but you get that back somehow, whether it's through taxes or endorsements or however. You're not going to go hungry if you don't take that Supermax. But I do think like a team like New Orleans is at a real disadvantage right now because you have to build the kind of culture, and there isn't really a culture there. You have to build, and like you said, you were starting to see some of those signs late in the season, I think, as they kind of push for a playoff spot, and then also obviously in the first round where I don't know how you felt. I was not surprised by that result as someone kind of wasn't covering the league last year, just kind of watching it. Like that felt like a series, and they had the best player, and that's one of those easy kind of old playoff rules, right? You go with the team that has the best player, and against a lot of teams, they're going to have the best player. But I just don't see tremendous long-term future for him there, and I think that's generally when people don't think that too is a time sometimes when people change agents. I don't think you need to change agents necessarily if you're just going to sign the Supermax deal they're going to throw in front of you. What are you negotiating?
Well, I mean, one thing he does need is I think he needs to be involved in more endorsements. I think he's too good a player to not be even more visible. I mean, I don't know where you rank among the NBA best, but he's up there inside the top 5, I would imagine, of NBA players, top 10 at worst.
Yeah, at worst.
In that group. And I don't know, he's visible in some degrees. Red Bull does that stuff, but I think he needs to be more visible.
Didn't he have like a eyebrow thing?
He did, yeah. It was like it was a Red Bull thing when he faked off doing the whole eyebrow thing. But look, here's the thing. I don't know if I'm a Pelicans fan. I don't panic necessarily because he signed with Rich Paul.
I mean, we have we're still talking like 2-3 years out, right?
Yeah, I mean, 2020 at the end of that season, he can get opt out of his contract, I believe. And players make their own decisions. I mean, look, I'm sure there were people in Paul George's camp that would love it if he was playing in LA, but Paul George, the player, was comfortable with Oklahoma City and comfortable with Russell Westbrook. That's why he stayed. From the Lakers' context, though, to spin it back there, I don't know that they can win a bidding war with some of these teams to go and get him. I just don't think there's enough.
Well, so much depends on development, right? And stuff like, I mean, like Kuzma's an interesting piece because in some ways it's sort of found money, right? At the end of the first round, you get a guy who has one of the more prolific rookie seasons in Laker history. I mean, he looks terrific. You saw him today. We'll do a little muscle watch here for the people, like best shape of his life, Chris. I don't know if you've ever heard that before.
Another bingo.
Yeah, right? But no, looks really good, right? And I think, obviously, we don't know what Lonzo Ball is yet. We don't know what Brandon Ingram is yet. And I think those are interesting pieces. Now, obviously, depending on what Boston wants to make available, they have the best treasure chest, right? Like, because they have Jason Tatum, who I don't think they're trading virtually in any circumstance.
No, I think you're looking at, if it's Boston, it's Jaylen Brown, Marcus Smart, and some collection of draft picks.
Yeah, but Jaylen Brown's a great piece. Like,
he's an all-star caliber player. I think he probably will be an all-star.
I mean, but and then I think depending on how heavy ended. Now the weird thing is sort of like, in my mind, it's like, oh, you just have the Lakers, like you push all your assets in today. You call New Orleans, say the writing's on the wall. He's signing with Rich Paul. Like he's not going to be there very long. We'll give you Lonzo Ball, Kyle Kuzma, and Brandon Ingram. We'll make this work. We'll get them off your hands. And it's like, congratulations, New Orleans. You've just become last year's Lakers. All of a sudden, it's like you just have the same team that was here.
Battle in New Orleans.
Yeah, So that's not very realistic either. But so like you need to see those guys, I think, develop a little more before the Lakers have the ammunition to get this done in a trade. But it's interesting as we see players exert more power, about their destinations. I think as teams have, seen that you can't let these guys go for nothing. That is a lose-lose proposition for you, that it's better to, like what Glenn Taylor's thinking right now is like, let's just get something, to help push us forward a little bit. And maybe that something can turn into something else down the line. These are the little moves behind the scenes in the NBA that get people like us talking and say, like, I know when I saw it, I was like, that crazy theory I had was like, all of a sudden I was like, well, maybe I was a little right.
All right, let me finish with Boston. And
that's weird, out of character for you. Finish with Boston.
Finish with Boston. Well, I do the Celtics.
Let's take
Warriors,
you home. Let's take you home.
Let's take me home. The Celtics, Warriors, and Lakers are just going to be the storylines all season long in the NBA. But
not a lot of Hawks talk.
Not a lot of Hawks talk. No, unless Trae Young looks like Steph Curry, then we can have
a little Hawk talk.
Okay. Celtics had their media day today, and we got a first look at Death Lineup 2.0, as I called it, with Al Horford at the 5, and they took that picture, Tatum, Brown, Kyrie, Gordon Hayward. That's a potent offensive line.
Can we talk about that picture for a second?
Sure.
What I like to imagine happening, and I don't think this happens, but like I like to imagine like Terry Rozier like kind of walking over, just like, I want to take a picture with my guys here, like get all of us, and like the photographer being like, well, Terry, we only have 5. We only have room for 5 in this shot. Like the picture the Lakers tweeted out today had 4 guys on it.
Yes,
like no center. It was LeBron, Kuzma, Lonzo, and Ingram. Like I find these like the picture hierarchies to be really interesting.
Well, I like the Marcus Morris in Boston coined the phrase "bench with attitude." BWA is what they're calling the Celtics bench.
Okay,
because they all have a little bit of a chip. Terry Rozier was a starter. Whoever it is, Jaylen Brown may come off the bench at some point if Aaron Baines starts. Anyway, Kyrie Irving had an interview this week with Jackie McMullen where, and I'm sure he said something comparable at Media Day, but he thinks that this Celtic team can beat the Warriors. Now, you got to walk before you crawl, in my opinion, and this is a team that has young players, has never been to the finals. In fact, only Kyrie Irving and Aaron Baines from this group has finals experience. It'd be a major step forward if they win the Eastern Conference. But if they get there against Golden State, as it looks right now on paper and what we know about the Warriors, do you give them any shot?
Yeah, I mean, I think on paper matchup, certainly. I mean, I think this is what teams that are in the position to contend have been doing, is to try to figure out these lineups that you can throw out there when the Warriors play Draymond Green at center. Because for multiple seasons now, nobody's really had a great answer for it. Teams have done and tried some strange things to try to make it work. And when I look at this Boston team, I mean, I think they have the most talent in the East by a lot. I don't think it's very close, and I do think Philadelphia is a good team, and I think Toronto's a good team, and I think when the year's over, I wouldn't be stunned if 3 of the best teams in the NBA, in our opinion, were Eastern Conference teams. Like that's certainly something I could see happening. To me, though, Boston is the clear number 1 out there, and I look at that roster, and it just seems like it's tailor-made for these kinds of things. Now, again, it'll be interesting to see how guys who had inflated roles last year because of injuries, how comfortable they are to step back, how comfortable are the guys like the Gordon Haywards of the world, whose role now is certainly different than it would have been at the start of last season, right? Like his place on that team and that hierarchy is maybe a little different. I think obviously Jason Tatum's really like late season surge, his playoffs, had a lot to do with that. And I think you want to keep him growing and doing these types of things. So they're going to have to kind of figure that stuff out and figure out what their pecking order is. But they've got a terrific coach. They've got a terrific roster. They have a front office that's willing to tweak and do things. And they've got, like we said, like this amazing chest of assets that if they do need to get off some of these guys and they can build their bench or add a starter quality, they can add an all-star at any minute. Like there aren't a lot of teams, especially in that upper echelon, who could do that without sacrificing, their best players, really. And that's what separates them, I think, from everybody else.
I think as much as anything else, it's the biggest challenge of Brad Stevens' coaching career. And he has passed every challenge up until this point with flying colors. Taking over the initial team, a lot of turnover. Rondo was there for a minute, dealing with all that. He helped them through that, got them to the playoffs, clearly has the complete support of everybody in that locker room. Everybody's bought in to this former mid-major coach from Butler. However you want to rank the coaches in the NBA, Brad Stevens is certainly in the top 3 or 4 on that list. But now he's dealing with an entirely different thing, something entirely new. To your point, I thought Terry Rozier did a great job of diffusing some of the potential drama at the end of last season when he said, this is Kyrie's team, he's the starter, I'm coming off the bench. But he's also entering a contract year. He's also a guy that wants to get paid. Marcus Morris, to a lesser degree, last year of his contract, he wants to get paid. Jaylen Brown, looking to get that max deal for him at some point down the line. You're going to have guys on that bench that are going to take steps back at some point.
Well, and there's reasons like why, like what the Spurs did in San Antonio isn't, you can't replicate that
everywhere.
Hard to
duplicate.
Yeah, right? Because you need the right kind of people to make the right kind of sacrifices at the right kind of time, and you need different alphas to emerge at different times, and that transition has to be really fluid. And I think that's what I'm interested most in seeing with this team is, again, like I mentioned Hayward and Tatum, I think at last year that a lot of times in crunch time the ball would have been, in Kyrie's hands 1, Hayward's hands too. Like, where does Tatum rank in that now? Like, I mean, I think you certainly want him in those situations. I don't think he's a guy that you just flare out to the corner. He's too good, you know? So how do you balance that hierarchy in the situation? These are good problems. These are first world problems. But if you get the answers wrong and you get them wrong repeatedly, like, then maybe all of a sudden, you know, this balance and the harmony that everybody's saying now, and it's media day. It'd be bad if they were like, this is going to be a disaster. You know, that'd be a good.
I'm a starter. I want to play 35 minutes a night. Well,
yeah, pass me.
But they're going to have, especially early on. I mean, look, Hayward is just a couple of weeks into playing 5.
And look, and who knows how healthy they'll stay either. Yeah. Again, like, you know, Kyrie's a guy that's been hurt before.
You want to rest him on back-to-backs against teams. Like, there are going to be opportunities, for these guys.
They're like a European soccer team with like tons of stars, like with more than their 11. Right?
I thought they're like a hockey team. They can play 2 lines. You just roll lines out there. Substitute.
You are wearing a Nordique shirt right now.
I am right now wearing a Quebec Nordique shirt. I am. If I'm betting on it, I'm betting it all works out. I mean, Brad's been too good with this team, and there's too many unselfish guys.
What's all works out, though? Trip to the finals?
65 wins and go to the finals. I don't think that's a stretch with this group. And look, you know, I go back to this. I've said this a couple of times, and it's hard to kind of quantify because it never happened, but coming out of training camp, and I obviously spent a lot of time around the Celtics, so much of a buzz about what Hayward and Kyrie were going to do together. Like, so much talk about how they played off each other. Like, those two, I remember interviewing Kyrie right before the start of the season, and he could barely contain himself.
Name drop. What a brag.
No, but he could barely contain himself talking about him, like some of the stuff that Brad was designing for Hayward, because Stevens obviously had Hayward at college, so he knows how to maximize certain things that haven't already been maximized coming out of Utah. I really think that Hayward, as a facilitator, is going to be incredibly good with that group.
Another thing that he does too that I think is like wildly underrated, he's so good at getting the free throw line. And that stuff matters, like especially when you talk about teams that play in close games and you play in games in the playoffs, like having that guy that not just can go get you that basket, can maybe get you those points at the free throw line. And he's better at that than probably anybody else in the Eastern Conference right now. You know, Harden's obviously the king at this. Chris Paul has been very good at it at times in his career. But I look at a guy like Hayward and say, when you add that to what else they're doing, you know, you add that element of their offense where, you know, it's not just be a playmaker, do this, or you know, step out and hit big shots. It's also when these stretches happen in games where teams go on 8-0 runs. Like, in some ways, that's almost better than like a quick layup, right? As you stop momentum, get to the free throw line, you slow everything down, and he's really good at that. Like, we saw that a lot in Utah. Saw it happen in the playoff series against the Clippers. You know, first-handed. Just ending runs by going to the free throw line. And I think that's a little tiny thing that'll help them a lot. It's a great roster. I think, obviously, Boston fans have a lot to feel good about with this team. I like Philadelphia a lot. I'm going to go see Toronto here, and that's an interesting roster to me, too. Kawhi Leonard, if healthy, is the third best player in the NBA. And adding someone of that level to a team that was already pretty good, an organization that's been fairly healthy and has put pieces in the right spots. I think they're a team too, but I don't think anybody else has like the real expectations like Boston does. Like, Kyrie Irving's like the one guy in the East who could say that, and it's not crazy. He can say other crazy stuff.
Yes, which he does.
And has.
At all the times. Dan, welcome to the National NBA beat.
Thanks. When do I get my jacket? Do we have team jackets?
I believe Woj took them to ESPN with him. I'm not sure.
He's got the box.
He does. I mean, there may be some leftovers at the Yahoo office, but if I get one, I'll hand it over.
Let me know.
Thanks for joining me. That's it for this week's episode. My thanks to Dan Woike for joining the show. As always, you can download archived episodes on iTunes, TuneIn, Stitcher, really anywhere you can download podcasts. While you're there, post a comment, leave a rating. You know I appreciate it. And I'll see you next week.